Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. I hope everyone enjoyed the previous show, what was, I believe, Howdy Partner, and going through, I think it looked like Commander, which is a pretty cool tool. Talking about tools, AI has been all of the rage, especially around a lot of the buzz generated by certain AIs. And especially in the coding world, I have actually done a bunch of playing around with these AI tools myself, and actually trying to see if I can get rid of a lot of the heavy lifting. But on this topic, we have the lovely Sid Kruger. Actually, is that pronounced Kruger? Did I get that right?
Yeah, Kruger.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I'm getting better. Like my ability to butcher last names, it's amazing.
Yeah, people often get it wrong, and I'm like, there's like the Kruger National Park, there's like the Kruger Rand, and there's even Freddy Krueger. So there you go.
Yes. How could I even forget about Freddy Krueger? So, do you want to give us a little bit of a background about you, and also what we're going to be covering today?
Yeah, cool. Cheers, Casey. Look, it's really cool to be back on the show, and I get to say back on the show because it's actually my second time on the show. So yeah, thanks for having me back, Casey. So just briefly, who am I? I've got a different role to the last show that we had on. So I've actually been in the AWS space here for almost 10 years and been building out AWS solutions initially with my own consultancy in the beginning, which worked out really successfully. We grew in the early days of AWS, so this is kind of like 2013, so 2014 onwards, grew really successfully, built some incredible cloud solutions, some amazing customers, and then got acquired into Deloitte. I worked at Deloitte for a couple of years running the AWS practice there, and then had the privilege of working with you and the SA team, Casey, at AWS, and looked after New Zealand, one of New Zealand's largest customers at AWS as a global principal solution architect for Xero.com, and had a really amazing time doing that. And but a new opportunity presented itself, which I was really excited about, with a company that I've looked up to for a long time called Source Group, which are part of a larger organization called Amdocs. And so I'm working at Source Group now as a head of cloud solution technologies in the CTO office, and that's been a pretty awesome journey. So I've been here for 2 months, and I'm still really deep on all the community engagement stuff that I'm doing all through the AWS community, and I'm looking forward to chatting a little bit about the AWS community with you, as well, as it's a area of deep passion of mine, before we kick off into the actual tech deep dive with the Amazon Code Whisperer and AI coding assistants.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be a lot of great fun as well. So you did mention around the community work, and I know that creating communities for businesses and also just like in general is a hot topic, and is always a very laborious and hard task. Do you want to give us a little background on what your dealings in the AWS community?
Yeah, man, I'd love to. Cheers, Casey. Look, I actually co-founded the AWS user group in Wellington. Gosh, it must be 2015, I think it was. So this was like really, really early days. It was actually the first AWS user group in New Zealand, and back in those days, we had some really enthusiastic people. It felt like we were really we were kind of spearheading something that was really, really incredible. Just to call out a couple of people back from 2015, we had Scott Patterson, who's now with AWS, and my old business partner from API Talent was working hard on the user group, setting that up with me, Win Aykroyd, and We had Jethro Carr, part of the community back in the day, now at Marigold. So there was a core group of incredibly enthusiastic people that really saw that AWS was going to be something really incredible. And so, yeah, we jumped on the bandwagon, built out the user group. I've been sort of leading it with a group of friends. I consider the community a group of friends, actually, for Wellington initially. And now, we've been actually expanding that into other regions across New Zealand as well. You mentioned it can be quite a hard job at times. It's voluntary. You don't get paid for it, but you get a lot of rewarding experiences from it, and you get to see other people grow. You actually grow yourself as well, so you get that aspect of it. Yeah, so we've done many meetups. I mean, obviously, I'm based in Wellington, as are you, Casey. So it's cool to be on the Twitch stream, on a global stream, live from amazing Wellington, our capital city in New Zealand. We've done 57 meetups, and we've tried to do one every month. And just, one of the really difficult parts was when we were having COVID lockdowns and we couldn't meet in person anymore, and we had to move everything remote, and we needed to learn a whole new way of event management, because of course the community is made up of AWS specialists and enthusiasts and practitioners essentially, but we're not event managers and we're not marketing professionals. And so getting that sorted out can be quite a challenge at times.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that a lot of people that attend would be doing it purely for networking potential. So when it goes virtual, it kind of loses that audience. So how have you seen the audience grow over the years or change?
It's so, I mean, going back like a couple of years, like pre-COVID, I mean, in Wellington, which is a reasonably small place, on from a global perspective, when you consider it, we would get up to 100 people or more even at one point. This is a pre-COVID times, and it's grown and grown and grown. And initially we started off and we'd using a meeting room at API Talent, and then we used Deloitte offices a couple of times, and various different consulting partners and customer meeting rooms and what have you. But then it kind of grew and grew and grew, and at some point you get to a size where you need to start looking at proper event management, and you need to rent out a whole theater. So we graduated to pubs, and then we used event space in pubs, and then we grew even bigger, and we needed proper theaters, and started to having to invest more money into it to get these larger spaces. Um, so after COVID, it's obviously it went right down, because like you mentioned, it's really all about the networking. It's about hearing the speakers, and it's about dedicating your time. Like when you physically go to a meetup in person, you're like all focused, you're zoned in on that dedicated time. Whereas when you're online, you're distracted, and maybe you've got someone from work messaging you, and obviously they're paying you, so you typically have to prioritize that over the nice to have online meetups. So we're back, ramping up. I actually see more and more people coming along. It fluctuates a bit. If it's raining, less people show up. If the sun's shining, more people show up. Even finding the right time can be interesting, because you get different type of people that show up to different times of day, right? So and typically, if you go for like a lunch and learn sort of experience with the meetups, then you'll get more sort of family oriented people that have families that need to go home, and have busy family lives. They'll come along to the lunch times more. People that are further out and have a longer commute, they want to leave earlier, so they won't show up to the afternoon meetups. But for that, you'll get more students show up, so you get a more younger audience when you go for the later sessions. I don't think there's a time that works best. You just get different types coming along, so it's nice to vary it a bit.
Nice. What would be like, say, the lessons that you think would be worth calling out here, especially as you mentioned that those different times would attract different crowds, and would it make sense to move the time based on the content, or essentially just make the content fit the time?
Yeah, well, so I mean, there's a bunch of tips there that I'm happy to sort of share a bit. And I mean, one of the things that maybe makes Wellington community quite unique, I think, to the rest of New Zealand, but also maybe the rest of the world in a way as well. Although I have seen this model that we've got replicated a few times, but quite rare. Normally, the meetups are run by a specific consulting partner or a specific customer, or there's individuals that essentially their employer ends up sponsoring the meetup, because the meetups they're not for free, right? They're
Mm.
as in people show up and don't have to pay, and they're for free, so they're truly for the community. But it costs money, be it pizza or drinks or what have you. So we in Wellington, we were like, okay, well, if we wanted to be truly independent, and obviously people shift around with work and you might have different employers and you still want to be part of the community. So we say, okay, well, what would a truly independent community look like? And you quickly realize that actually you've got no bank account, you can't receive money, you can't pay anyone, you got no ID number, so we're like, okay, how does this work for like non-profit organizations or incorporated societies, and what are the structures around that? So we actually incorporated as a non-profit incorporated society, and have a proper ID number, bank accounts, and everything. And the nice thing is when you're actually a non-profit, you don't have to pay for anything, because largely all your banking services are for free. So to go truly independent, typically I'd say you'd need to go for that kind of a model. That's worked well in Wellington, but across the country, we still see, like, Auckland's got 2 user groups that are actually working really well as well, but they're more vendor aligned, so they have particular vendor sponsorship. We've got like the Auckland one that AC3 run, and they do a really, really awesome job. And then we've got a brand new one that's just come up, which is the tools and programming one in Auckland, run by the CMD group. But I think they're branching out. They've got like other people coming in as well. They've just kicked off. They've done a couple of meetups. They're really kicking ass. The hard part as well, Casey, is actually keeping the momentum. Because in the beginning there's like this excitement of something new, and that's maybe another lesson learned. Keep it interesting. Change the venues up, change the time slots up, and make sure that you have interesting speakers come along every single time. We've tried to go with a recipe of avoiding AWS speakers. So we try to get people from the community, and that's, I think, has worked well. Maybe sort of my last tip on that one, just because I don't want to spend too much time on this, is try to make your meetups about a particular theme. So that makes a really big difference, because people come along because they're interested in the topic, right? And then they'll do some networking, some socializing as well, and that's a really important aspect. But typically there has to be a secondary draw card as well. And so if you choose a topic that's going to be really interesting for someone, like maybe it's a topic around security, or you've got platform engineering, or you want to do some sort of programming on AWS thing, or a serverless theme, or what have you. So if you dive into those, people will come specifically for that. And typically you don't see, at least we found this in New Zealand, people come along for a meetup, then they won't show up for 2 or 3 months, and then they'll come to the next one because it's a topic that they're interested in, and they're like, oh, I haven't seen Seb for like the last 4 months. It'd be cool to catch up again. And then that's like a really good way to do it. Yeah, so mix it up, keep it interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely some really good advice. And to make sure that we don't keep going on about the community stuff when really this is about the AI powered assistance and
That's
revolution.
true. That's
Yeah,
true.
so
Hey, and I do want to make an announcement though, which is something before we move into our actual topic of the day. So one of the things that we're like, what's next for the community, and we've tried to build a full day single track conference several times in the past. We've had a couple of attempts at setting up in New Zealand AWS Community Day, but we're actually doing it this year, and I'm really, really excited. We've got a strong committee of 4 to 5 people working, every single week. We meet weekly to put this together. So we're sort of unofficially announcing that we're doing this in September in Wellington. So we're going to have an AWS Community Day here in Wellington. We're finalizing the venue this week. We're hoping to finalize it today, but hopefully we will at the last moment have it, or latest will be it tomorrow. So I'll make a formal announcement then. We've already got a website ready to go live. We've got the registration method figured out. We've got call for papers figured out, and that one is something that we're really excited. So I just wanted to make sure that we make a little bit of an announcement around that one before we kick off into our main topic.
awesome. Okay, so let's go into it because we have nearly was like a quarter way through the show, so we got a little bit distracted, but that's all good. Nothing goes according to plan on Twitch, especially when people jump in and throw curveballs in. So, what are AI coding assistants?
Yeah, man. Okay, cool. So this is like super hot topic, right? And I think everyone generally associates it with, GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not that interested in talking about that on this particular show. I really wanted to zoom in on the Amazon Code Whisperer, which is the AWS solution, and I've been using that for quite a bit. So I wanted to give a bit of a demo. But just before we do that, I thought, I just give a bit of a high level overview, sort of where it's come from. The evolution of it, because I find it pretty interesting, often to sort of try and at least somehow predict where things might be going. It's good to look into the past to see how things have evolved, acknowledging that things advance exponentially, of course, not
Yeah.
linearly.
And
Yeah.
if you do have any questions for Seb about any of those other AI tools, then do feel free to ask. He is very knowledgeable.
Oh, thanks, Casey. Hey, man. So I'll give you a quick definition of that, and then maybe we'll just share the slides and roll on from there. So the way that I think about AI coding assistants is that they're essentially advanced AI-based tools that are designed to help programmers specifically, or coders, in their software development process. So they understand, they predict what essentially your intent is, and then they offer real-time suggestions, code completion and error detection, all that sort of stuff. So these kind of like AI-powered tools, they can save a lot of time and effort, right? And they can increase the productivity and ideally improve the code quality. They can really lower the bar to getting into coding as well. So I think we'll find, essentially everyone eventually will become a programmer, and I'm absolutely convinced, when I've been saying it for years.
Where I'm sitting a little bit on the other side, where you still actually have to understand what you're trying to do in order to get the AI like to understand it, because
Yeah.
otherwise, like it's kind of like if you're a school teacher, right? You can't just try to communicate what your intent is if you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, actually, I mean, on that, like the intent part is actually super fascinating to figure out. Like, there's a whole like thing right now, where there's this new job description, which is like a prompt engineer, and like that's probably like just like a blip in history, and in a couple of years or even months, maybe things move so fast, we'll look back and we'll be like, oh my goodness, what was this prompt engineering all about? But the challenge is, right, that when you're devising the natural language sort of a description of what it is that you want to um, what you want to generate as code, it's actually really hard to say that in a natural language, because naturally it's not, it's there's a lot of ambiguity in the English language. And so when you write that down to then go and generate the code, there's some degree of interpretation, and that's going to be really interesting. I think there's a whole separate science around how to devise the most sophisticated prompts that generate the best possible code. So yeah, that's going to be a really interesting thing. I'll be really keen. Like, if anyone wants to like post some questions around that in the chat or anything, be super keen at the end of it. Maybe dive into some of those more sort of esoteric, out there aspects of it. Yeah, man. Casey, do you want to share the slides, mate?
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. All right, cool. So now this is actually a presentation that I delivered at the last AWS meetup in Wellington. So hence you've got the Wellington logo on here, which obviously that's pretty cool. We're very proud of the silver fern on the logo, and sourced, of course, where I work. So let me see if this slide forward movement thing works. Ooh, it works. Okay, cool. So let's dig into a bit of a brief history here. I was reflecting on, well, where did it all start for me? And of course, often we're a bit, when we start think about where things are going, we start with ourselves and our own sort of journey from it. And my journey started as a programmer in MS-DOS as a teenager, in around about 1992. And I was actually coding before that, as a much younger kid even. But in 1992, I kind of wrote my real first sort of proper program, if you want. And Casey, do you know what programming language this is? I'm going to put you on the spot.
I really want to say VB Basic, but it doesn't look like it at all. It looks
No.
a little more rudimentary than that. And it's also
No.
the wrong age. It's also the wrong age because it's 1992. But
Oh no, I wish I was your age, man.
I'm a few years younger than you, unfortunately.
This is actually a language called Pascal. And back in 1992, there was Turbo Pascal was like a big thing. We learned it at school, and I got really into it. And so this was my first sort of intro into proper integrated development environments. And I think this particular thing is interesting because it's, in a way, it's like the first time that we really saw proper coding assistance. Even though we're in the DOS world, we haven't really got into the proper, Windows graphical or the Macintosh sort of space. So the thing that I wanted to call out with this particular image is like, you've already got syntax highlighting, you've already got debugging, you've got tracing, you've got code searching, you've got basic refactoring, and that actually is coding assistance as well. And so that's why I figured it'd be good to call that out. I actually think of that whole sort of era, and I called it age on the slide, but I think of it even as an era. It's the era of rapid application development, and this is where IDEs became like the thing, and every developer had to learn the latest IDE, and it had so many bells and whistles. And often, like when if you went to uni and started to learn to code, or you learned it as a kid, there were so many buttons to press, and you wouldn't really know like where the heck do I like compile the code. It's like frigging complicated. You don't know where to click, because these IDEs are getting more and more powerful. But ultimately, it's all about like, once you've learned that particular tool, you become incredibly effective at it. And so typically what we saw within these IDEs is, syntax highlighting, as we already saw, code completion, which is all about that developer, acceleration, refactoring, version control, integrated, debugging, all of that kind of stuff. And for me, the first one where it got really advanced was when I went to uni, and they taught me Java programming, and they said, oh, we're the Eclipse shop, and everyone's got to use Eclipse, and it's the be all end all for
Yep.
Java programmers.
When I
And
was
so
at
this, yeah,
university, when I was at university, it was the exact
yeah,
same Java and Eclipse,
yeah.
and yeah, it's amazing how dependent you get on like what's it, print line statements when you don't know how to use it properly.
Yeah,
Like,
bloody
look at
shocking.
horror. Yeah.
Yeah, people put like system.out.println like everywhere. It was crazy. Heaps of security flaws in that, actually, but that's a separate topic. So anyway, so my point here that I wanted to make with the Eclipse editor was actually that you're starting to really get into rapid application programming here. When you look at the code completion capability that you got inside Eclipse, and you could program incredibly fast by just essentially typing little acronyms, right? So you just type sys out and then like control space, and it would like autocomplete, the whole line for you. Or you got, the entry to the code, which is public static void main, and you type in like main, and then it do control space, and it set everything up for you. And so in a way, that is a really big coding assistant. But the key thing here is that it's still all really, really static. There's no smarts about it, right? It's like, to display that particular box that you see there on the screen right now, like that's static code analysis, where it goes into the class and gets the methods out and just displays the methods, and then traverses up the hierarchy of the class, and says, oh, the parent class has got these methods and these are overloaded, so we'll just add them to the table. So it's pretty basic, but still for the time was pretty awesome, pretty advanced.
Yeah,
So yeah.
autocomplete is the best. But it still kind of struggles with the even in today's world with the dynamic languages like JavaScript and
Yeah,
Python and
actually,
Lisp.
I mean, you make a really good point, right? Dynamic languages are incredibly hard to do static code analysis for, because the information isn't there, and you kind of have to get into the runtime to actually, go and figure out what it's going to be. And so Eclipse would struggle with that, right?
Mm,
So that's a really interesting point, and I think that's really where the AI era is really becoming incredibly powerful. We'll get into that. So let's fast forward like 14 years into 2015, and generally these days, like everyone I know is using VS Code, and I thought it'd be interesting to actually dig out like what is what's the history of VS Code. And it was actually introduced in 2015 by Microsoft, and you can see that adoption has been just incredibly exponential. Like 2016 7%, but then it increases every year, every couple of years, and now apparently, according to the survey, it's almost 75%. So that's pretty extensive, and it's obviously the IDE of choice, and it is incredibly powerful. So this the kind of rapid application programming and the coding assistants that are going to be built into this kind of tool is that's really where it's at now.
And some people do make a good point. Free tools do make it a lot easier to adopt. I think
They do.
yeah, the big brother Visual Studio, like that comes with a
Yeah,
pretty hefty price tag. Still, I
yeah.
absolutely love it though, because I don't know, I just don't need developer. And also, someone else mentioned QBasic. Did you ever end up using that? Given
No,
it'd be around in
I did
Chrome.
some basic, but you know what? The first one was actually Logo, where you had like this is like literally like primary school, and you had like a turtle which is represented by like a
Oh
triangle,
yes.
and and it would like move around, and this was and you would select go to, and then you'd give it like the coordinates of where it would go, and it could do like fancy like pictures. I mean, it's not fancy, but back then we thought it was pretty cool.
I know
So
exactly what you're talking about. That was
yeah.
awesome, and I absolutely loved it. It's one of the things that got me into programming. Yeah, it's
That
a
is
really
actually, yeah,
useful
that's
thing.
what got it kicked off. But yeah, I did a little bit of basic, but I got into Turbo Pascal pretty quickly. I was lucky to get a PC. All my mates were on back at school. My mates were on like Ataris and Commodores and all that stuff. Anyway, so I thought it'd be interesting because I was kind of curious. So I figured others might be curious as well. Just have a look. Well, what are actually the other IDEs? Because obviously VS Code's not the only IDE out there, and it's actually interesting, to just take a little bit of a look at this here. A couple that stick out to me, like Vim, like crazy, like who would code in Vim? I mean, it's so basic, but actually Vim is an incredibly powerful editor, and so I think that's highlighted by it being actually quite high up in the ranking. It's probably a skill worth learning. Like for those that are kind of newer in the industry and haven't been around for that long yet, Vim is a skill that is very much still relevant.
And Vim has a very active like plugin development community.
Yeah,
Although Sublime has kind of taken some of the wind out of Vim's sail, but it's still very much like got that historical plugin scene.
yeah, absolutely. I think even like I mean, obviously console-based editing, Vim is sort of the king in that space. You know, it,
Mm.
I don't see Emacs on there, and not that I want to open up the Vim Emacs. Yeah, actually, someone just said I saw it in the chat just now. Interesting how Emacs isn't even on there. Damn right, Emacs is like, and it's the same like Perl is kind of gone, and sort of like I think like Emacs and Perl were kind of like the past era in a way.
My
Um,
professor loved Emacs. It was like the only thing he ever
right.
used.
Well, they had a built-in psychologist. Do you remember that? Or anyway, we're having too much fun when you get serious again. All right, so actually, this is kind of the era where I think when you're diving deeper into the code generators. Well, code generators really came from the whole low-code development space, right? Where you have essentially business domain experts generating models using often graphical ways, or so visual programming ways. So you don't need to learn any syntax at all, and then pressing the generate button, and it would go and generate thousands of lines of codes, or massive code blocks that are actually fully executable. And I kind of think of this as really where full scale or large scale code automation was really happening. Drag and drop canvas type stuff. So to me, this is the age after rapid application development. Now you're in the sort of low code development space. And I did some digging as an ex-Amazonian. What are the low-code Amazon tools that might be interesting to showcase, and how we've got Amazon's journey in this as well, at least from a external perspective. QuickSight, I think, is a really cool example. Where you've got a graphical way of building out business intelligence dashboards. I'll just kind of dig through these quickly. Honeycode, I haven't seen too much of this myself in my own customer base, but certainly when the launch came out, I found it quite interesting. You kind of can think of it as table-driven programming environments. So, largely if you got any kind of data background, you can devise tables with interesting data, and then it auto generates you, a UI on top. And there's like no coding involved at all. And then, of course, Amplify Studio is, that's like a really big investment and a massive one. They, recently had this additional feature here where essentially you can take a Figma component, and you can get it to embed it into websites built using Amazon Amplify Studio. And just to show you what that looks like, right? So you can go and create graphically a component, using the Figma standards, and then it goes and generates you the whole code in the background. And I'm like, well, if that isn't coding assistance right there, in at pretty high end scale, then I don't know what is.
Mm. And I think that in schools now they're using a like a gaming builder that has like the drag and drop components on it.
Hmm.
I can't for the
Hmm.
life of me remember what it's called. Obviously, because I don't have children in college yet, but it'd be horrifying if it was. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know for a fact because I know a couple of I've had a couple of conversations around it. So
Mm.
like those building block style coding
Yes.
assists have definitely been a lot more accessible.
Well, especially in the UI space, it's been like pretty full on, I think. And it makes sense because you've got all these designer, graphical type orientated people. Whereas, back end, like I've never been a graphical person myself. I've always wanted to code. Um, so I think you end up with different types that prefer different interfaces, and I mean, and that's a separate interesting topic in its own right, actually, because different people want to have different interfaces, but we want to find ways to bring this kind of AI-based coding assistance into all of these areas, depending on whatever lens you want to work with, be it graphical or code or tables, because you're like the BI dude or whatever. Um, okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, and I think this is, probably what everyone's kind of been waiting on, and we're 30 minutes in, so we have arrived, and the AI code generators are truly here. And I pulled out a bit of a timeline. Casey, were you around when the ChatGPT got released? Like, how did you hear about it?
I was alive in 2022.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
that
figured.
young.
Well, it arrived, I mean, pretty promptly. Like it seemed it was really silent, and then suddenly, it was just like boom. And again, someone said it in the chat, right? Like actually, Paul, I know it was you because I saw your logo. Welcome to the show. Free is like everything. So it was free, and so everyone had a play, and everyone was kind of blown away with it. But actually, before that went live, actually Amazon Code Whisperer was released. Now, I thought that's an interesting timeline, right? Because all people talk about is kind of the other side of it. But when you say, okay, well, actually in June, Amazon Code Whisperer was released, and then in November, the whole chat thing happened. But Code Whisperer had been around for a wee bit already, so that's obviously super fascinating to see, where that's going to evolve into. But yeah, let's do a bit of a demo. We have a quick look, and we've got some interesting chat stuff happening here. Function of the
Mostly,
beauty.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just like
Connects contact flow is a good one too. Yeah, true. So someone's actually just Anthony McDuck. I'm sure that's not the real name. Amazon Connect contact flow design is a good one too. Yeah, totally. I mean, Amazon Connect is all flow driven, right? So it makes sense that it's a graphical sort of view. Sorry, Casey, did you want to add something to that?
I was actually going to say with the functional beauty thing, just like how physical architecture has many different architectural styles, like classical, brutalist. You have then like God, what's the time period called? I should know this. I actually studied a little bit of architecture, but apparently I didn't retain the knowledge. Yeah, it just goes to show because like I'm very much the same. Like if you get any interface designed by me, it's going to be very to the point, minimal guardrails, and I'll be like, I can't expect you to know what you're doing. Like
Yeah,
don't say 25 in words in the field that like is obviously asking numbers. But anyway,
yeah,
I digress.
yeah. Okay, let's dig into Code Whisperer a little bit more because it's kind of like the star of the show in a way. And it's interesting to think just, well, what is actually supported with these tools? Because I think, you know if you're in a particular editor and it doesn't support these tools, well then you either stop using the editor or you just accept that the tool's not there, and you're just going to lack that kind of degree of productivity. But obviously you've got VS Code. I think if something isn't supported in VS Code, it's already not going to happen. But the interesting thing with Code Whisperer that I think maybe people aren't aware of is that actually it is integrated into Cloud9, which is the browser-based editor from AWS for those that don't know. And then of course you got the Lambda console as well. So it's pretty cool to see that this tool is actually being properly integrated into the various different browser-based editors, that Amazon's building out. Another interesting one, of course, is well, what are the languages that are supported? C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, Python, TypeScript are listed. This is like literally, I've taken this out of the FAQ. Yeah, I think the interesting thing maybe to call out on this one is that obviously the more popular languages, the more training data there's going to be, and so arguably the more advanced the AI is going to be, right? Because the more training data, the more it's going to be able, the more use cases it's going to be able to do at a high quality. So if you go with something obscure, like we've seen some of the other AI code generators out there on the market, and they say we will do any language, and you're like, okay, but if you're in like Lua or something, obscure, it's like there's not going to be a lot of training data, so there might not be a very advanced coding assistant.
I think Factorio was written on Lua, so you probably got a lot of hate there. Factorio is a very popular game.
Right.
Anyway,
Well,
again, I'm really good at going on tangents.
that's good, man. Have you actually done some Lua programming? I actually have as well, but it was at uni and I had a lot of time.
I was trying to write a mod for Factorio, so I started and then I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on with this language. I got scared.
Oh dear. Well, I'm not sure there's a lot of training data. Obviously, like this stuff is actually built on open source code, right? Like it's not going to have proprietary code available, and most open source code is actually built using JavaScript, Python, TypeScript. So those are the really popular languages. So those are, I think, stand out. So I'd say keep that in mind if you're thinking of using this kind of stuff. And what does it cost? It's free. And again, our the guy in the chat, Stormlord, said this stuff, it's free. You can't beat free. So why would you pay $10 for someone else that essentially does the same thing? It's region agnostic, so you use it wherever, and you kind of don't really worry about it. Yeah. Any other things you think I should point out on this one, Casey?
No, not off the top of the head.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I thought it'd be cool. So coming up with a bit of a demo. I didn't quite know how much time we'd have, so I thought I'd keep it simple. And the most simplest possible of architectures that you can think of is submit an API call through Amazon API Gateway to a Lambda function that says download this image and put it into an S3 bucket. Like it's about as hello world Lambda like as you can get. And then I thought what we'd do is we'd actually open up VS Code and we'd literally get Code Whisperer to generate us the code for that particular AWS Lambda function. And so I was thinking, so we'd generate two functions. One is to download the image. The other one is to upload the image. So download the image from the web server, upload the image into S3. And then, we can kind of sort of see how it works. The demo is live. I need to point that out. So fingers crossed, okay? And just normally, live demos are tricky, but now you've got like a non-deterministic AI algorithm that's generating you stuff, and you're like, so what I tried yesterday, like at home, might actually give me something totally different. So let's just roll with it and see how we go.
Every other live demo has gone flawlessly on the channel, by the way, so you will be judged.
Oh, okay. Well, the demo gods are strong on this channel, my friend. It's good. All right, let me re-present. So I'll stop this one and I'll present my VS Code editor. I have it open. Yep, cool.
So it's a good start.
Give me a second to bring this up. There we go. All right, let me know once it's showing, Casey.
It should be now, yep. Let me also know from anyone, the viewers, if that is big enough or if we need to increase the font size.
True, actually, yeah, we can zoom in a little bit. Is it Control Plus? Yeah, it is.
It's normally fine because like they can go full screen. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Wowie has said bigger. I don't want to go much bigger than that because otherwise it's going to get squashed. Okay.
Yeah.
But okay. Anthony said that's good. Thanks, Anthony. Okay. So to get Code Whisperer to work inside VS Code, you need to install the this AWS toolkit for VS Code. And I mean, if you're working in an AWS world and you're an AWS engineer and you don't have this plugin, then by all means get this plugin today.
Something's gone horribly wrong.
So like something got missed somewhere and you might be in the wrong film, but get this plugin. So once you've got the plugin, it actually comes out of the box with Code Whisperer. So you'll see down here when you go into developer tools, you got Code Catalyst, CDK, and Code Whisperer. And you can turn it on and you can turn it off. And especially like if you're maybe playing around with like GitHub Copilot and and Amazon Code Whisperer, and you want to run them in parallel or something like that, and I've been doing a little bit of that, then what you got to make sure is that you pause the auto suggestions, because otherwise, as you're typing your code, you don't know which AI code generator to use, right? So you just gotta keep that in mind, right? And they do generate you different stuff, but essentially they do largely the same thing at the moment. So I'm just gonna turn that on. So I'm just basically as I'm coding, it'll auto suggest stuff. There's a couple of interesting things here though that are worth calling out. So the first one is that in order to use Code Whisperer, you do need to have some sort of IAM user that gives you permissions to connect through to the Code Whisperer APIs. Because ultimately what it's doing is it's submitting like a code snippet or a comment or something, some text into the Code Whisperer API, which then goes and says, what is the code that you'd recommend for this? Or what are all the examples that you'd want me to list out? And so you obviously got to be authorized to call the Code Whisperer API. So go into the Code Whisperer page on aws.amazon.com, sign up, get an ID. There's this concept of this AWS Builder ID, which maybe people aren't that familiar with, but essentially you don't have to have an IAM user. So you can literally just, like, I used my personal email, signed up for a Builder ID. I use that as my identity, and it's free. You don't even need like an AWS account. Like it's pretty cool. So sign up for a Builder ID, and you don't have to worry about all of the complicated IAM setups or whatever. Although they're actually
That's a
not that
good
complicated. But it makes a difference. Like if you're in an enterprise environment, which most of us are, right? And your administrator hasn't made Code Whisperer available to the organization, you can still use this, but you just have to go and set up your own Builder ID. All right, cool. So we've got the build ID, we've logged in, we've turned on the auto suggestions. There's two additional little features here. We got a security scan, which you can go through and it can scan your code and it'll tell you if there's anything kind of funky going on and recommendations around potential vulnerabilities. And you've got this code reference log. So far, I haven't quite figured out how to demo this because I haven't quite got Code Whisperer to generate me large enough text blocks that are essentially like almost replicas of what's already out there. But the theory behind this, as what I understand, which I think is really powerful, is that if Code Whisperer can't generate you the code automatically, it'll just take something off a public repository and present it through to you as is. And there might be any kind of copyright issues around that. Maybe the code is GPL'd and therefore you can't use it or whatever it might be. And so it'll actually show here in the view right here from where it's taken that code. But if it's fully auto generated the code, well then there's no copyright infringement potential there at all. But if there might be, it'll display it. It hasn't actually displayed anything in there for me yet, but I certainly think having this as a feature seems like a really powerful thing. And I haven't seen this in any of the other competitors yet. So that's an interesting one. Okay, cool. So I thought what we do is we've got a demo Python script here that I've prepared in advance. And you can see it's a Lambda function. Obviously, we're going to build a Lambda function that's going to get a file from a URL, and we've got a comment here that we're going to use to generate the code. We're then going to write another function to upload the image to S3, and then we've got our usual Lambda handler, and we're going to take the output of the first method, which is get the URL from the file. Get the file from the URL, my bad. And then we want to pass that file into the function that's going to upload that content into an S3 bucket. So the way this works is that we write our comment, and now we want it to generate us a Python function code And the way to trigger this, if you find so, just put the cursor in, and generally what it's supposed to do is supposed to auto populate code, but sometimes you got to prompt it a little bit. So the trick is you do Alt C and you press Alt C on your keyboard, and it does its code whisperer call, and it says, okay, do you like this particular function definition? And you can go through and cycle by pressing the left and right keys on the keyboard, and it'll give you different options. So you can see as I'm pressing the right button, you can't see it on camera, but I can press right, and if I go left, it goes back through the potential options of code samples. I might only want to have the function definition for now, because actually one of the things that I'm hoping that it gets advanced with is it actually gives you more lines of code, but at the moment it seems pretty restricted about how many lines of code it presents back to you. So I might want to have something with like a try catch or try except sort of block. So I might say, okay, I think get file from URL is actually a really good name. So if I like that, then I go press the tab button and I've got my code generated. So now I'll go down cursor and press my Alt C again, and it's going to give me some code that it thinks is maybe what I want. So is there something with like a try except? So it doesn't seem to want to give me that. So this would be the bit where you'd say, okay, well, it's an assistant, but it doesn't do the work for you, right? So if I like this code, but I actually want to augment it with some try except in there, then I'd tab autocomplete it, and then I'd put in my try, and I'd have to still, autocomplete it now, and have to, write it out. So you still have to, you can see you still have to code, and it's not going to do everything for you, right? But it does give you a pretty good starting position to go with. And I think this is the important part to be aware of. It's an assistant. It doesn't do your job. Right? You still have to do that yourself. So we've got the first function done. And we didn't, the cool thing is like, we didn't have to go and dig through documentation and figure out like, oh, what is the function that we need to call or what have you. All right, good. So let's do the next one. So we've done the function to get the file from the URL. Next one is we're going to do the upload part. So again, I'm going to press Alt C, and it's going to give me a couple of options. It's going to suggest a name, and the name is based on what it's interpreted in our comment section. Let me drag this a little bit shorter here. So I've said upload an image to S3 using a file name, a bucket name, and a key. So you got the file name, the bucket name, and you've got, it says it's object name, but arguably it's a key name. So that's fine. And it's even suggested equals none. Yesterday it didn't do that. So it's an improvement. So I like that. So I'll auto complete that. And I just keep working my way through it. Alt C. And it's suggesting some code here. Essentially, the object name is the file name, so this would be wrong, right? Because the file name and the object name might be. So if it's none, then make the object name a file name. That's actually pretty smart. That's pretty cool. We could roll with that. And then it's using this upload file, suggesting an upload file name, bucket, and object name. What else have we got? So this just seems to be a white space difference, not a huge difference there. Here it's actually returning a response object, so that might be better. So again, all I'm doing is I'm pressing left and right button to just kind of see what options I've got. At the moment, it seems to it's not giving me very smart options here. It's largely all the same thing with different white space. So maybe I'd go with that one, and there's no harm in doing a return here. So we'll roll with that, and I'll save that. And then I scroll down to my handler, and this is where I want to pass the output of the first method to the input to the second method. And again, I might just press Alt C and let it generate. Alt C, come on. There we go. I had to do it twice. So it says, okay, first line could be get the file from the URL. That looks pretty good, and it gives us the file content. See, I like how it's smart enough to name these variables correctly. Like it knows that the content, like it returns response.content, and it knows that it should give that the file underscore content. That's pretty cool. It's not just like file or text or something. It's pretty smart in how it names things. And we know naming is, what is it? The two hardest things in computer science is like naming and cache invalidations, I think, the two hardest things.
There's
And
quite
oh,
often
look,
where I'm seeing code that would just be called response, and you're like, cool.
yeah. Hey, look, it's already auto suggested the next line of code. That's pretty cool. And it's actually done this, like I had the comment above, like it's pretty ambiguous, right? Like, I mean, just in terms of like natural language sort of coding, if you want, right? And it's automatically translated. And there's so much ambiguity in that comment above, and yet still it's pulled it out and done a really good job of it. It knows which to put in where, like it's not putting the S3 bucket in the first argument and file content in the last argument or something like that. So that's pretty good. It knows to grab these variable names up the top here. Yeah, done. And now essentially we've got a fully working Lambda function. Let me make this smaller here. So this is what it's generated for us. It's simple, but if you don't know what that request.get, or that you've got upload file, I mean, do you do upload file, or do you put object, or do you do something else? Knowing what method to choose here, it's pretty cool that it makes a good recommendation about it. And of course, if you're using the Amazon tool, the Amazon code whisperer will be trained on a lot of Amazon code, so you can probably trust that this is a reasonably good recommendation. Of course, you still got to test it all and make sure that it works and what have you. Yeah, but that sort of closes out my very simple hello world of Amazon code whisperer.
And also, one of the things I'd say is that when you're moving between languages, quite often you know what you want to do, but you just don't know exactly how to do it in that language. And this would give you that really good starting point.
Exactly. I mean, like you saw earlier, right, with this one here, where there's no error handling across it. Like you do still need to put the error handling in yourself, or at least maybe it's that you learn exactly, this would be the prompt up here, right? So that could become much more extended out to say, give me a function to get a file from a URL using this method, using error handling, and writing out this particular error exception or something like that. So you can write these incredibly detailed prompts. But that's like a whole separate sort of knowledge thing. I think that we're all going to have to ultimately learn how to get really good at it.
Yeah, that's like learning a whole another programming language, but it's the programming language for your coding assistant.
Yeah, a natural language program. I mean, is that what COBOL was supposed to be? But yeah, it's true, right? I mean, natural language is ambiguous, so writing it out. I actually think that sort of if we're push the boundaries a little bit on this, it's probably more that it's going to become a conversation, and not like this like hardcore prompt engineering, like the most sophisticated line of text that generates you the perfect code artifact. I think it's more that you'll see, I mean, you've seen already with GitHub Copilot X, where they're bringing in the essentially GPT-4 into the editor as a chat interface. And I think that's really where it's going to go. And so it's not about that hardcore prompt engineering. It's about having a conversation with the assistant and saying, oh, the above function, please add error handling to it. Oh, now I inspect it. Okay. Well, actually, I'd like you to not use the upload file method. Now, please go and use the put object function. And then as you're having this kind of conversation, the code evolves. And I think that is then where the real coding assistance really happens. Whereas this still seems like really early days, like this reasonably primitive in a way.
So, what's your kind of prediction center? Where do you think this is all going to go in the long run?
Well, like I say, obviously the next step for this is to bring the chat assistant, the coding chat assistant, into the editor. So you'll be live interacting with it. I think there's some really fascinating sort of use cases where you might start coding with your voice, right? So can we have a full coding interface that is entirely voice driven, driven by a really intelligent coding assistant that is anything that is text can essentially be translated to voice, right? So I think that's super fascinating. We saw this demo of was it Greg from OpenAI took like this photo of this napkin thing. To me, that still seems very gimmicky, and ultimately the website that it generates is kind of like a throwaway sort of thing. So that feels like gimmicky, and I that's probably more like just a stepping stone. Like the multimodal aspect of it, where it you generate multiple other things. I do think, like, from a coding perspective, it's all about text. So the multimodal thing is in my perspective not all that relevant. Although if anyone wants to challenge me on that in the chat, they're welcome to give it a crack. But to me, coding is all about text, so it's all about text generation through a conversation with an AI bot, and that bot is ideally a sophisticated enough interaction that I can evolve the code through giving regular prompts to the bot, and the bot is aware of all of the previous prompts that have gone. It's like a conversation flow. It's not an isolated prompt, right? Because that's the conversation bit. It's like a session,
If
if you want.
if you think of it, it just mirrors normal development, really, because essentially development is just a series of conversations that you have with your stakeholder that has a history of your previous conversations, and you're iterating it over time as you learn more and more.
Yes, yes. I do believe it is all about iterating, and I think that with the bots, by wrapping around these bots, there's actually a lot of guardrails that you can put in. I think we're going to see a lot of custom bots. So it's like, at the moment everyone's talking like ChatGPT, and I'm using ChatGPT to generate a whole bunch of Lambda code, or Terraform code, or it can do CDK code, and it can do all this kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, but what if I was to generate a brand new bot that is fully aware of all of the security guardrails in my organization, that can apply all of the coding conventions that are in my organization, and so that I have this incredibly sophisticated coding bot, but it knows all about exactly how I need to operate my code, or how my coding conventions are within my specific organization. And I think ultimately that's like an incredibly powerful direction.
We are coming up to time, Seb, so I'm just going to say there's one last question that Stormlord has posted.
Okay, let me have a look. So how do you feel about the trust aspect of this? It seems to me that good coders may benefit from being augmented by such tools today, but if you're not so good, then there's a risk of insecure code being implemented. Yeah, I think this is a really good comment, and I do think that there's a risk, or it's probably probably inevitable in a way, that we're going to go through a period, maybe over the next like year. I don't think it's going to be long, because this moves so fast, but there's going to be a period that we're in right now, where a lot of people that are brand new to coding, they don't really understand the code that's being generated, and they'll use this tool to generate code that is full of bugs, full of security holes, and full of flaws. And it's the whole idea of testing your code, or getting these tools to generate you unit test for your code after you've written the code, it's all back to front, because it's counter the whole test-driven development methodology. So it's write your unit test and then the code, because you validate the other way around. It's like write my code, then generate your spec. It's like it's too late. It should be the other way around. So I do think that we're going to have this period, Stormlord, where we're going to go through that. But like, if the direction is that we're going to generate custom bots that have all of the guardrails built in, right, that know about our organizational requirements, then suddenly these bots can actually take the smarts to prevent people who are less knowledgeable engineers and don't have that same level of experience from making those mistakes. So ultimately it's going to be a solved problem. I'm confident of that. By the way, last comment, we must remain optimistic. Like, this is like the most important thing, right? Like, if you listen to like some of the thought leaders out there, it's like, doom and gloom, and there's AGI, and we're all going to die, and it's like, oh my goodness. Like, it's about being positive on this one. It's these things have incredible potential, and ultimately I think as a human race, we will move this into an incredibly powerful, positive direction that's going to augment us in incredible ways.
And this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is integrated into Cloud9. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Code Whisperer is in Cloud9. It's also in the AWS Lambda console. Yeah, cool, mate. You're welcome, Stormlord. Thanks for commenting.
Mm. And thank you, Seb, for coming on to From the Field and sharing your knowledge not only around the AI powered assistance, but also the community work that you're doing. Um,
Yeah, it was my
it's
pleasure,
very
man. Thanks
welcome.
for having me.
Cool,
Yeah,
awesome.
it's been fun.
For everyone else, enjoy the rest of your workday or evening or morning, depending on where in the world you are. And until next time, Mā te wā.
Mā te wā. Bye bye.